Hello, everyone. This is Aurus Julius Sanchez with Aaron Vera here on BroTalk. Guys, thank you so much for being here. We really appreciate it. Today's episode is all about what is the purpose of life? We're just going to have a conversation, bro to bro, talking about this question. And my brother and I, we brought different perspectives, either religious or theological and philosophical ideas. And we're going to just talk about different perspectives on how to view this question. What is the answer to this question? And do we agree with it or not? Again, please, guys, like this video, share it with your friends and family. Put your comments down below if you agree with us or not. Please, guys, we would really appreciate this. Thank you guys so much. And please come join us, guys. Come. So, Aaron, I actually want to start with the joke. I don't know. Have you ever heard about the joke of the philosopher who tries to find meaning in life? Have you heard of the joke or no?
No, I haven't.
So there's a joke that I heard. It's, why did the philosopher give up on trying to find the meaning of life? Why did he give up? Why? If you could guess.
I don't know. He go crazy.
Okay, you're getting close. It's because every time the philosopher thought he found the answer, someone else would go up to him and tell him, "Well, that's one way to look at it." Again, it's not like a comedy special joke, right? But I'm just saying, but I think the joke, quote unquote,
It's it,
yeah, say it.
it's like a good introduction to what this episode is gonna be about.
Yeah, you said it perfectly. Yeah, it's like it chives in so well. So,
Yeah,
and I want to start by saying this, and then I want to hear your thoughts, which is,
yeah,
right, why this is probably one of the most asked questions in the world, right? I think even a quick Google search, you and me and anyone else watching this, like I think they can tell quickly, what is the meaning of life? What's the purpose of life? Is one of top questions asked by almost everybody. And I think in our last
hmm
conversation, in our last episode, we spoke about the practical steps, like how to figure that out and then what to do. And I think me personally, I could be wrong, but me personally, I think that's much easier because practicality, it's like, oh, I just have to do A, B, C, and D. And us as humans, once we know what to do, we as humans, we like that because they're like, okay, I know exactly what I have to do. But
right.
the question of like, what's the purpose of life, right? It's so open-ended and subjective and huge and gargantuan. It's like it freaks people out. It's like there's so many answers, so many ways of looking at it, so people get freaked out, right? I also feel that when people, we as humans, we also like patterns. We like to seek meaning, right? That's one of our drives. That's one of our needs as humans. We want to find meaning to questions. That's why if you look at history, humans progress. We advance in technology and cooking and science and astronomy. Why? Because we're
Yeah,
always asking why, right? We like to find meaning, right? That because that gives us answers, and we as humans, we like to feel that comfort. Also, just another one I'm gonna throw out there. It's because
yeah,
I think once we get older, right, and we see people that are dying around us, our family members, our friends, right? People are poor, they're suffering, we see injustice, we start asking ourselves, what's the purpose of this in life? Why is this happening to them or to me? And what have I done with my life? And then you can go on a cascade of questions and just infinite questions, and you try to figure this out. So I think that's why, again, I think there's many answers to this, but
yeah.
from what I understand, from what I've read, from my studying, from my own thoughts, I think these are just a couple reasons why this question is so huge. But I don't know. What do you think? Do you have any thoughts on this? I don't know.
I do actually. I just to let the audience know, I'm just writing down every time you speak. So sometimes I'll be looking to the side. So it just makes it easier for me
Hmm.
to remember these things. But I did like when you mentioned about practical steps. I feel like as human beings, we do like practical steps. Why? Because it's very easy. Imagine we knew how to do everything perfectly, everything practically. I don't think
Hmm.
it'll be any type of fun. But while we have to challenge ourselves, while we have to find, in a sense, for this podcast, meaning, that's
Hmm.
what could sometimes freak people out when you don't know. Which is why in the previous podcast we talked about how to find our meaning, right? And once we find our meaning, what to do once you identify it. Which, if you
Yes.
guys want to see that podcast, you guys go to the previous podcast before, and or the link up here, and you could listen to that podcast which we did last time. But going back to the topic, it does freak a lot of people out
Hmm.
because it's a question that could seem so complex, but at the same time be so simple. And I
Mm,
believe it's all depends how you execute it. So like what I believe what the meaning of life could potentially be or somewhat is to do good,
mhm,
right? And that's such a simple answer. What is it to do good? Well, you could do good in so many different ways. You could be a good
mhm,
father, you could be a good son, you could be a good energy or good force to or a good change to this world. And all depending on how you execute it
mhm,
is going to be different for everybody. And going on your last point, when you also get older, I feel like when you've had so much experience, sometimes, I mean, us, right? We're still in our 20s. And sometimes, I mean, some of us, maybe like yourself, are a person that like seeks more into theological things
mhm,
than myself. But usually, if we're talking about like the average person, the average, maybe even secular person, they start to look into this maybe later in life
mhm,
once maybe they already have a family, they have kids, they've seen a lot of bad things happen in this world, they see people die, they see hunger, they see injustice happening, is when they start to ask themselves these questions. And but it's normal.
mhm.
It's
Yeah.
normal to ask ourselves these questions. And that's why we always have that drive and that seek. But as we've studied, there are many different ways. Like just like you said in the joke, that's just one way of viewing it, right?
Mhm.
So I feel like once these people or myself or yourself ask these questions, it's up to the person itself on what they want to believe in is the meaning or purpose of life. What do
Correct.
you think?
Yeah, 100%. I definitely agree. Um, and I'm just curious. I don't know if you want to start first or me. Do you want to
Hmm.
go with the first perspective that you found out, or should I go first? Or do you want to go first with yours, which was a very interesting one?
Yeah, I think I'll go first just because I believe it's a little crazy.
Crazy good or
To
crazy bad?
I believe it has a little bit of both, right?
Okay.
Mostly, maybe a little bit more bad, but we'll see what the audience says, right?
All right.
Um, the first one is existentialism, right? Which is basically life has no inherent meaning. It is up to the individual to create their own purpose.
Mm,
Um, it's basically it gives the individual a lot of freedom. It gives the individual a lot of responsibility, and it all depends on your subjective experience on how you're going to interpret life, right?
okay.
So, um, everyone creates their own purpose in this life depending on their choices, their
Hmm.
decisions, their actions, and they go from there.
Okay.
Um, and to give a little bit of a history background, this all started from well, they call him the father. Either way, he wasn't the one that started, um, or he's not like quote unquote the inventor of
E-
externalism.
Existentialism. Yeah.
Existentialism.
It's a hard word. I know. It's a
I
very
know.
hard word. Hard word. Yes.
English is not my first language.
Uh-huh.
It started from Soren Kierkegaard, right?
Mm,
Which interestingly enough, he was Christian, but he
yes.
believed, and the reason I say that is because I believe that this type of belief falls well with atheism, right?
Yes.
Um, but he is considered to be the father of this type of belief. And he talked about very interesting things on how a person is not inherently good or successful. They become so through their decisions and how they choose to live.
Hmm.
What
Okay.
do you think
Okay.
about that?
So I definitely, as you mentioned, there's definitely good and bad with this perspective, right? The
Hmm.
existentialism, right? Um, I definitely agree with the components that we as humans we are responsible for our choices. We have freedom and responsibility. I definitely agree with that. And you have to live with your authentic self 100%. I do agree with that. Right now, I don't agree with the fact that life has no inherent meaning. And and this way of perspective, this way of thinking is like, hey, you have to go out there in the world, go find your meaning, right? Go
Hmm.
experiment, go do things, see what works for you, what doesn't work for you. And then whatever you become successful at, right? Whatever you're good at and you continue to do that, that is your
Hmm.
purpose in life,
Yeah.
That's basically what he's saying, and it does go well with atheism, because atheism, is the belief that God doesn't exist, or there is no such concept of a supreme being or of a deity, right?
Yeah.
So this falls well with it, because you're not under the framework of religion or God, or like God is your creator. You're there to serve him. You're like, no, 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 no. Life has no meaning. It's like you said, it's a blank slate. You get to
And
draw and create.
you're
So
writing, yeah.
you go and do that. But I think it has a lot of flaws. I do see some good, but I think it has a lot of flaws. But yeah.
Yeah, no, I agree, because it basically focuses the practice of existentialism
Uh,
is basically based on personal freedom,
mm-hmm,
on embracing uncertainty,
mm-hmm,
and living authentically,
correct.
which I think could have a lot of good to it,
Mm-hmm,
but it can have a lot of bad to it as well. Now,
mm-hmm.
the good of it, right? I feel like it's a good way, and I was studying about this, and it talked about how this method or this type of belief is used a lot, and you might laugh or not, is believed is used, sorry, a lot in mental health
Interesting.
or
Okay.
in like therapy.
Mm-hmm,
Why? Because when a therapist is talking to an individual, right,
mm-hmm,
and consulting them in a sense, or just just having a conversation, I feel like they can't come from any they can't come from a one-sided way. They have to
mm-hmm,
come from a very neutral way, right? Because you can't usually, tell me if I'm wrong, but if you go
mm-hmm,
to a therapist is not going to tell you you're doing wrong because God says you're doing wrong, right?
mm-hmm.
Like that's not the way they're gonna like seek therapy for you. They're going to try to understand you and probably talk to you in a way where like um
They can help you.
they can help you, but this this perspective of life is all going to depend on how you go about it, on what you do,
Mm-hmm.
right? And I am, from what I was studying, it says that it helps a lot of individuals when they have to confront the issues of like anxiety, of death and purpose.
I definitely see that, because you're right.
Hmm.
I mean, the therapist is not really there to tell you what to do. As you said, they're there to understand you, understand your psyche, why you react or why you think a certain way. And then if it's toxic or not good, they're there to help you maneuver it out of it, or maybe change, right?
Yeah, they
And
give you suggestions. Uh-huh.
suggestions, recommendations. But if you think about it, you are right. They're there to then tell you. A lot of times, again, I'm not saying all therapists do this or all use the same tactics. I'm not
Hmm.
generalizing. But yeah, they're telling you, listen, it's up to you at the end of the day. It's your responsibility. You need to take action to get out of this phobia, to stop thinking this way, to stop being toxic, to have a better relationship with your mom and dad. And they are saying, listen, it is up to you. You need to change. It is about self-responsibility, right? But I don't think therapists are also coming and saying, hey, life has no meaning, right? Like, I don't think most therapists are saying that, but I think a lot of therapists have to come at this from a non-theological perspective, because, right? Because psychology is more of a science, right?
Hmm.
Right. And of how do we attack, not attack in a bad way, but like, how do we go to the brain and how do we help them out, change their mindset, their frameworking? How do we do that so that so they can take responsibility for themselves, so they can live authentically, they can have their own freedom, and they're responsible for their decisions, and they can put meaning back into their own life. So yeah, I definitely see this 100%. Yeah, but I think religion also can give you the same frameworks, though. It's just the component of God is there too.
Right. I believe in theology, you got to follow like God's divine will,
Hmm.
or that's what you pursue to apply to your life in a sense.
Hmm.
While in this type of belief, you kind of follow like your own will in a sense.
Yeah, you do. You go out, you experiment, try your own will.
Right.
And I would say, and you tell me what you think, the
Hmm.
biggest flaw, or one of the biggest flaws about this way of thinking,
Which is
and yeah, say it. Did
which
you
is
want to
what
say
I
it?
was going to talk about. No, 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 no.
Go
I don't
ahead.
I don't no, no, I don't know what you're going to say. I want you to say what you're going to say, and then I'll dive in a little bit.
It leads to prostitution. I'm just kidding. No, kidding. No, not that. No. It leads to nihilism. Well, I'm not saying it lead everybody. I don't want to
Hmm.
generalize, but it could lead a lot of people to depression, nihilism, and like it could get them even more crazy mentally and like get them more out of hand. What do you think?
I do believe that. I believe it has its flaws, right? Like you mentioned, it's negativity. Because if you're basically setting your own rules
Hmm.
in kind of a sense, right? And it's interesting you mentioned nihilism because one of the challenges that this belief faces is existentialism can seem to allow for subjective morality, which some critics argue leads to nihilism.
Interesting.
And could you remind me what nihilism is? Can you like define
Yeah.
it for a second?
So, nihil, Nihil, and from the Latin,
Means nothing,
it
right?
means nothing. Correct. Yes, you got it. It
Yes,
means
yes,
nothing.
yes.
Yes. So basically, nihilism is this belief, this way, this perspective. Now, again, there's different levels and there's different categories of nihilism: political nihilism, existential nihilism, and so
That
forth.
there's no like belief in life is meaningless, basically.
Correct. And that there is no absolute truth, morality, or meaning in life. Like what you believe is right or wrong that's a construct. It's not real. What your belief life has meaning, that's not real. What you think is truth, that's made up. It's what they taught you. So nihilism is like you don't believe in these absolute truths or and everything else I said. So yeah.
Right. And I believe that that could be a flaw to existentialism, right?
Yes.
Because there is no bar in a sense of in a sense towards morality.
Mm-hmm.
You kind of make that up as you go,
Mm-hmm.
depending on your life experiences,
Mm-hmm.
on what you've been through, right? It's kind of the bar you're going to set, but is that quote unquote the right bar, right? And that can
Mm-hmm.
apply to, that could apply to children. That could apply to like people wanting to, change their sex as
Yeah.
well, because they believe that is right and there's no right and wrong to that, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that's where I feel like it conflates with the theological um views of what the purpose of life is.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah. Um, yeah, because then at the end, if we keep going back and forth with this,
Yeah.
the main argument is going to become, well, one of the main arguments that we can eventually do a podcast on, I'm not saying we're going to do that here, is where does morality come from, right? Because if nihilism is saying there is a category
Now,
called,
mhm.
yeah, go, tell me.
And I was going to say, they believe that purpose is self-created,
Correct.
while in theology, it says that purpose is divinely ordained. So it's a bit different.
Yes, it comes from God, right? So
Hmm.
this moral nihilism, the people who believe this, they'll say, well, morality, right? It's there is no such thing as an absolute morality, right? These concepts of this is an objective moral truth or not, that's all made up. Those values are made up, right? And depending where you come from, they can change slightly, right? Like for example, if you're born in a Nazi home in a country that's Nazism, right?
Yeah.
For you, killing Jews probably that's not a bad thing. You're like, no, we have to do this. They are the inferior race. We got to get rid of them. That they're bad. They're no good, right? But look, you were right. If right, and again, I'm not saying I believe this. This is just certain arguments I've heard,
Hmm.
and they're like, no. So clearly, as you see, it's based on where you're raised. It's based
Yeah.
on where you're raised. Who are your parents? That they're the ones who shape your morality and so forth.
But the interesting part of that is that everything goes back to something, right?
Hmm.
So, like, whatever I was taught or whoever was taught, let's say I was taught from my parents, and
Yeah.
my parents believe this, but their parents believe that. And then their parents um believed in some other thing.
Yeah.
So it all ties down. And I believe if you keep going back through generations, through generations, through generations, it's all
Mhm.
going to tie down to some type of theological belief. especially because that's where it kind of, I believe, all comes from.
Mm-hmm. Interesting. I think it depends who you're asking. They might agree with you. Maybe social scientists or anthropologists, they might not agree with you. But
Hmm.
I do believe you. Like I think I would agree with you to a certain extent, right? Like
Hmm.
for example, in Judaism, the
Yeah.
answer to this, for example, is that, well, one of the many answers to this question is that basically God instilled in everyone's in our consciousness this this morality compass. Now, of course, can your compass be ruined or twisted? Of course, if you're brainwashed or you're raised in a cult or if you're raised in a Nazi family, right? Like obviously there's ways to change your morality, but we've always heard those stories where it's like people were raised in a certain way, but they knew what they were doing wasn't so good. And at some point
Hmm.
they're like, I can't do this anymore. Now,
Yeah.
where does that come from, right? It's so the answer, at least, and I think Christianity also gives this answer as well, that God has
Hmm.
instilled in all humans, Jewish or not Jewish, God has instilled in everyone a moral compass. So, for example, don't steal, murdering is bad, right? Adultery, right? You want to make sure that there's justice in the world, right?
Hmm.
Don't torture animals, don't do these things because you just want to do it. Like these things, these are basic moral truths, right? Like obviously, if I were to
Yeah.
ask you, should an adult sexualize or rape an infant? Of course not. That's ridiculous. Like, in what world is that possible, right? So, from the theological perspective, that is a moral absolute truth. That's a no-go. There is no around it. There isn't. Now, certain things, obviously, there's different circumstances, but that's a moral absolute truth. You shouldn't do that.
But I believe in the other, which is, I can never pronounce it,
Existentialism.
existentialism.
Yeah.
There is a go around it,
What's the
right?
go around it?
Because you said in how in the theological, in this case you're
Uh-huh.
talking about Judaism, there's no go around, right? Like you shouldn't do that to a child,
Correct.
right? Because it's written, and that's what's practiced. That's what religion believes in.
Hmm.
But in the other view, you could kind of because it's self-created,
Hmm.
you kind of determine based on your subjective experience of life. You could put that. Oh no, that's all right.
Hmm. Interesting. No,
I
no, no.
it's a
You're
little
not.
bit intense. It's a little bit intense.
Yeah, no,
But
but we're talking about the exception here. Like
yeah,
we're
yeah,
talking
yeah,
about
yeah,
very
yeah, yeah.
intense things. Now,
Yeah.
I just want to make sure you are not saying that just because someone's an atheist or believes this, that it doesn't mean that they're not
No, no,
moral,
no,
right?
no.
Okay,
But I'm
okay.
just saying that there's loopholes.
Gotcha. Okay, I understand you. Okay,
There's
got you.
loopholes, like right. So majority of the people that believe in existentialism,
Uh-huh.
right, are gonna believe that, I would assume, raping a child is bad, right? Like you mentioned.
Of course, yeah.
But there's a loophole to that
Mm-hmm.
because life is is doesn't in a sense have a meaning when you're born, and it's created through your meaning,
Mm-hmm.
and it's self-created through your
Mm-hmm.
life experience and what you do. Then if you really believe that this wrong thing is the right thing, you're really going to believe that. That's what I'm saying. There's
Interesting.
like a loophole to it.
Interesting. Yeah, I guess
I
that's
don't know if I'm
valid. Yeah.
going too deep, but at least with the
Mm-hmm.
theological ways of viewing it, I'm sure there's loopholes, but because life is very gray, but
Mm-hmm.
there are some things that are very black and white, and there is
Mm-hmm.
absolute no loopholes to that.
So then what you're saying is that certain things there is an absolute truth, an absolute moral value, but that's what you're saying. But you're saying that if you believe this, potentially if you fall from existentialism into moral nihilism, you fall into that nihilistic path, right? There's like loopholes
Hmm.
you're saying, right? Um, because I think if someone believes in existentialism, the other thing is like, hey, you have the freedom, but you're also responsible for your freedom. So if you do
Yeah,
something bad, that's not good. You're affecting humanity, and it's going to affect you as well, either spiritually or physically, right? But I definitely see what you're saying.
but that's when I don't want to dive deep so much into this. Um,
4 hours later, so okay,
but and then where do they determine what's good and bad. Like, where do they get that from? Right?
So are
Because
you asking me a
whatever,
continue.
it's
Uh-huh.
more of a hypothetical question. I mean, if you do have an answer for it, great.
Okay.
But where do they get their good and bad from? Is it inherently? Is it in
Uh-huh.
us? Or are they just basing themselves off what society believes? Because society believes this is bad or this is good, depending on where I live, then that's just what it is. But where did that come from, right? Or do they, there's also, I'm pretty sure this is the exception, but there's also the people that uh believe that whatever is wrong is actually right, and whatever is right is actually wrong.
Mm.
And yeah, they'll fall into nihilism, but part of I can never pronounce it, existentialism as well.
Hmm. So I think, yeah, I definitely see what you're saying. And I think that this is also another critique, a con of existentialism. It's like the frameworks. What are the objective frameworks? What are the guidelines? Because it looks like there isn't such objective guidelines on what's right and wrong, and like and to other questions, probably, right?
Exactly. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And I think from arguments and debates that I've heard, people who are atheists, or maybe they're more agnostic, but they believe this, they'll say, well, I get my morality from what I learned in school, from my parents, and I was born like that, but not I don't necessarily jive with the thing that God gave it to me, or this is inherent from God, but I just
Hmm.
picked it up from my own subjective experience and with my studying. So it's more of like a humanistic perspective as well.
But when you have, don't you think that when you have subjective, like, you said framework, right? In,
Yeah.
instead of an objective one, that could be very dangerous.
Yes, yeah. But then their argument, because I've seen the argument, they'll say, okay, but the God argument, saying that God instilled in us this objective framework. What are the objective frameworks? What are they? And then people will say, oh, don't murder, don't steal. Okay, but we need more specifics, right? So you see how this can go back and forth.
Yeah, it 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 can.
And again,
I
yeah,
feel like there's an argument to defeat it. I don't want to go into it, but I believe there is.
we could definitely do an episode where we just talk about this topic if you want, like subjective morality versus objective morality. Maybe
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
we could do this episode if you want. Okay, cool. Do you have another perspective? I think that was interesting, that one.
Yeah, that was interesting. I have one more. Before
Tell
because
me.
I definitely want you to share yours as well. But it's about Stoicism. I believe
Ooh,
it's a very common way of viewing life, especially nowadays.
yes.
Is because it falls hard on like the red pill type belief. I don't know if you heard of like the blue pill and the red pill.
I've seen it in podcasts, and I think it's like a Matrix reference, right?
Yeah, so it all started from like the Matrix movie that came out, I believe, in 1999, and they were like,
Mm,
take the blue pill, the red pill, and that's where it all came from, right?
mm,
Um, I don't want to get too much on what the red pill is, but basically what
mm,
Stoicism is, just you could relate it to that, and we'll get into that later. But Stoicism is basically the life's purpose to live in accordance with nature and cultivate virtue, right?
holy.
So let's go into a little bit in depth about it. What is Stoicism? Well,
Mm,
what does it teach? Well, it teaches that the external events are beyond our control, and that we
mm,
cannot control, and we can control, sorry, our responses through reason and self-discipline.
mm,
And also that Stoicism offers a practical guide to resilience and purpose when we face adversity.
mm-hmm,
But its focus is on detachment, which is could be a con
mm-hmm.
about Stoicism. Is detachment can seem emotionally distant. So we'll get to that.
Okay.
That's gonna be a con that I'm gonna mention. Um, but I believe there is a lot of pros to this, right?
Mm-hmm.
One of the examples that I was able to look into was an old historical figure, which was called Marcus Aurelius,
Yes.
right? Which is actually in the movie Gladiator, uh, which I did go see recently. But I saw the second one. The first one is Marcus Aurelius. Yeah, it's all right. The first one is way better, in my opinion.
Uh-huh.
No, you believed before that Gladiator 1 was great.
Yeah,
All of a sudden,
when I was 12, yes. But then when I rewatched it when I was 21, I was like, yeah, this is the action is great. No, the action was always great. I just think the storyline was like a little cheesy and not the best, but the action was always great. That I'll give it. Always great, the action.
I think you just hate. In the top 50 movies. Oh no, no, sorry. The top 250 movies of all time, Gladiators in it.
I know
Anyways,
I know that is true. That
the
is true.
first one, the
That
first one.
is true.
Anyway, that is also subjective. But let's continue. So one of the things that it teaches is that you have power over your mind
Mm-hmm.
and not outside events. And what Marcus Aurelius belief was the importance on focusing what is within one's control.
Yes.
And we always have control of our thoughts and our reactions. So when we face adversity, and usually when we face adversity is when our thoughts and actions, I believe its importance of it takes a bigger role.
Mm-hmm.
And when you're not facing obviously adversity, because I believe those, especially those actions that you're going to take, are going to define you, are going to mold you into the man that you become.
Mm-hmm.
But if you're able to take control of your thoughts and reactions and in a sense stay calm, stay stoic through adversity, is when you could, in a sense, make the best decisions, right?
Mm-hmm.
So that's one of the things that he talked about when he talked about Stoicism. Also, he also talked about me. Yeah, I'm saying particular way to things. This is the important racial life development on attitude. Sorry, I'm taking so long. Okay. He also talked about the art of living is more like wrestling than dancing.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a very he viewed it from much more of an aggressive way than a passive way. Now, why did he say this? Because he talked about that the belief of life is not always going to be easy or pleasant, that we must struggle and overcome our challenges.
Mm-hmm.
And he emphasized on what perseverance is, on what resilience is. He also talked about how important it is to be able to have like in a sense an open mind, or when someone challenges you
Mm-hmm.
and proves you wrong, you're able to recognize it and change,
Mm.
right? And I believe that's where Stoicism surrounds itself on, right? It surrounds yourself of perseverance, of resilience, of change, of hardships,
Mm-hmm.
adversity, and being able to have complete control of your emotions, your thoughts, and your actions. And that's what he basically talked about. And
Yeah.
I believe in my opinion, it's a great way to live life as a man while you grow into accepting what life actually is.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the positive view I see from it. Reason why, because sometimes as a teenager, as a kid, your parents protect you from the outside world, which is normal because you want to, you want a kid to be a kid, right? Have
Correct.
fun, raise well. But at the same time, when they grow up and they start to become their own man, in a sense, focusing on men, not talking about women, sometimes you have to you want to give your kid a reality check, right? Understand that
Mm-hmm.
this is not how the world works. And sometimes applying a little bit of stoicism is a way to show that you always have to be accountable
Mm-hmm.
for the things that you do, and you have to be able to control yourself, especially towards strangers and the people you don't know.
Mm-hmm.
Because this world, just as it could be very good, it could be very evil as well.
Mm-hmm.
And so having complete control of yourself as a human being is very important when you're outside. So
Mm.
that's what I believe. That's the good of it, right? That's the pro of it. What do you think about the pro?
No, I think Well, first of all, as you mentioned earlier, this has become very popular, especially the last 10 years. I see a
Yeah.
lot of YouTube channels and TikTok channels where people practice Stoicism and they talk about what Seneca wrote, Marcus Aurelius, he wrote that famous book, Meditations and so forth, right? About Stoicism. But yes, because a lot of the times people get stuck on, hey, this event happened to me, this happened to me. Like life is so unfair. And yes, it is very true. Sometimes life is unfair. You're born with something, you get something later on. But as you mentioned, one of the big things about Stoicism that I've learned in the past is that you don't control external things that happen to you. So whatever you do have control, let's get good at that and be calm, and let's use logic and reason to advance our life to be better and forget about what you don't have control over, because a lot of people get stuck in that mindset. If only I didn't get hit by that car, right?
If
If
only I grew up rich.
if only I grew up rich, if only
Yeah.
if I was 2 inches taller, right?
Yeah, 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 yeah.
Like, oh, so many things, right? So it's like, don't focus on that because that takes up too much of your energy. Instead of use that energy into good things, into giving yourself better qualities to be a better person in life. And I think as a personal philosophy, because I know the next point you're going to say the con of this, I think as a personal philosophy, if you use certain aspects of this, right, in my mindset, if you mix this with your own theological belief, that's like the best
Hmm.
combination. That's the best combination. Because when you mix it,
I see what you're saying. Yeah.
not only are you under more control because of course God is watching you, but also you want to improve your internal self to be better as a person, as a human, but you can also relate to other people, and you're not like, what's the word? And you're not like throwing onto other people. Hey, how come you don't practice stoicism? Come on, man, come on. Because you're right, stoicism, as your next point, is very emotional detached, and many people cannot practice this. They can't do it. So if people just see you as a stoic person, but not with that theological belief, again, this is my opinion,
Yeah.
without that theological belief, you seem unreasonable and kind of mean and like, right? But if you come in stoic as your own personal thing, but you also believe in God and you come with that theological, you can understand people who are not that level yet. And you got like the best of both worlds. But I don't know. What do you think about the con?
I well, before mentioning the con, I believe there is a balance to stoicism as well. I believe you could compare it to like tough love,
Mm,
uh, where you want to make sure that person is accountable for all their
mhm,
decisions and doesn't blame the things that they don't have control of. Let's just focus on what we do have control of, right? We've always talked about in previous podcasts how we don't know the number. Either way, we could think of a number, but it does come to a certain age in life where you cannot blame what happened to you in the past, right?
yes.
Because you have to learn how to be accountable. That can't be your excuse. You're 30 years old. What the hell are you doing? This same mistake again, and you're blaming the trauma that you went through when you were 10 years old. Like, you know, in a way, it's very tough because you could tell that guy, oh, man up, or be accountable, be responsible for what you're doing, your decisions. But that's why I believe there's a healthy balance, and it could be very mean, like you said, and that's where the con comes in, right? Where it could be very distant emotionally, right? Where like you're especially that's why I said there's a healthy balance because you could go all in on this type of belief or on this type of meaning of life, but you have to have a balance to it because if you go 100%, then you don't learn how to have any type of sympathy or empathy
Mhm,
for others, and or sometimes for yourself. Because I think one of the things that I've been able to learn as well that we're all going to commit mistakes. And yes, stoicism teaches you how to be accountable and responsible, but at the same time, you have to learn how to, forgive yourself as well.
mhm.
And you can't, you want to go hard on yourself, but at the same time, you want to be able to understand that, there's a balance to it, not only for yourself, but towards others as well, when you apply that type of empathy, when you apply that type of sympathy, and especially towards yourself, because then you could be very cold on yourself when it gets to the point where you become very unrealistic with your expectations,
Mm-hmm.
because you expect yourself to, in a sense, to be so great, which is you should, but at the same time you have to remain realistic. What do you think about that, what I said about cons?
I think I agree with you somewhat, and I don't know. Maybe just the way I understood Stoicism, or from what I've heard or read in the past, maybe
Hmm.
maybe I understood it wrong, and maybe you're right. I'm not sure, but like for example, I agree with most of the things you said. Now, the point
Hmm.
you mentioned that like now again, I know you're not talking about generality, right? Because I can imagine there's people who practice Stoicism and still have sympathy and empathy for others. I think I think
Yeah, I
you
believe
agree with me, right?
that's the
Right?
healthy balance. Yeah.
Correct, right. Now, but what I think what you are saying is that this type of philosophy can lead to people not having that. But now, the point I don't think I really agree with, and maybe you can clarify something, is that if people, again, not everyone, but it's very possible if you practice Stoicism, it's hard to forgive yourself. You're very hard on yourself, right? From my understanding, one of the things that maybe Marcus Aurelius said was that you also have to accept your faith, not faith, your
He
fate,
did, yeah.
right? Where it's like you have
I
to
do
embrace
remember writing
life,
that.
its challenges, and this is all part of a greater order, right? Which, from my perspective, my definition of that is like, listen, yes, obviously the best case scenario is everything you mentioned, but at the end, if you fail or you suck at something or you haven't reached your goal yet or whatever you have control over, you haven't fulfilled it, just accept your fate. For some reason, this is happening to you, then maybe focus on what you have on what you can control and then try to fix it if you can, right? But I also understand what you're saying, where it's like with this type of mentality, you could. I'm not saying you this happens to everyone, obviously, but
Mhm.
I think I understand your twist to it, where it's like because it's so much about it's about you have control, you control what you can. When you do mess up, when you knew you shouldn't have, or whatever, you made a mistake, when you knew, when you had control, guess what? It's really onto you. And that could create depression. Or, as you said, if someone's a certain way where it's like they're very hard on themselves, it's very easy to fall into that perfectionist route
Yeah.
because if your whole mentality is like, hey, I'm doing what I have control and I still messed it up, then there's something
Hmm.
wrong with me. How could I do that? Is that what you were saying? Tell me if I'm right or wrong. What do
You
you
know, no,
think?
you're 100% right, which is the importance
Okay.
of of reading everything, right? Of what Marcus Aurelius said, because he also talks about fate. So I have accepted my fate now. I am wrong, and you're right. And you're right. So yeah, but yeah, like in a sense, if you don't read the complete thing, or if you don't read what Stoicism is into its complete form,
Hmm.
sometimes we just focus on what the eye attracts, and what the eye attracts is you got to go hard on yourself. You got
Mm.
to, accept whatever you do based on your decisions and actions. But sometimes, we skip the part of accepting your own fate, right?
Hmm.
So that was a really important point that you brought up. So thank you for that.
But the twist
But
I
no, no,
mentioned,
no, no, no. But
were you trying
you're
to say
sorry.
that?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I was trying to say that. I was trying to say that.
Okay.
You just clarified it better for me. Um, but let's go into the theological points of views, because I feel like we focus a lot on secular point of views,
We did,
uh,
which is not
which
bad. It's not
which
bad.
is not bad. Listen, a lot of people in this world um, live that way,
Hmm.
and we're not here to judge them, but we're here to explain what each perspective or way of living means and how it gives meaning to their life.
Hmm.
But now focusing more on the theological. I know
Okay.
you looked into one in particular, maybe others,
I did.
about a theological way of viewing life and the purpose, the meaning of it. Could
Hmm.
you could you talk to us about it?
Yes. So I did look into a little bit of Judaism,
Hmm.
Christianity, and another type of philosophical, but we'll see which one we have more time for. But yeah, let me talk a little bit about Judaism first, right?
Yeah, yeah, go for it.
Especially
That's
because we
actually
live,
the one I wanted you to talk about.
especially because we live in America, right? And a
Hmm.
lot of different scholars or historians will say this country was based of Judeo-Christian values, right? So Judaism. right? I'll start saying these two things. Number one, Judaism starts and ends with God, right? And also,
Interesting.
Judaism is all about the now. Now, of course, there are components of Judaism that talk about the afterlife or like paradise or 𝗹𝗵𝘁𝗲 and so forth that we could definitely talk about. But Judaism is really about the now, right? I would say Christianity is also about the now, but the
Hmm.
emphasis in Christianity, for the most part, I'm not saying everybody, for the most part, is really about the future, about heaven and hell, about all that stuff, about God's kingdom, where Judaism is about
Hmm.
the now. What can I do now to be a better, specifically a better person, a better Jew right now in front of God's eyes, right?
Hmm.
Because the main focus, which I think is fascinating, the main
Yeah.
focus, for example, of the New Testament, of course, it's about Jesus and stuff, but it really is about God's kingdom, right? And you want to be good and you got to accept Jesus as God or as the Messiah, accept him and that he resurrected. And if you don't, you're going to die. But it's all about the future, God's kingdom, where the Hebrew Bible, right, is really about the history of the Jewish people and what they went through and what they did that was really good and what they did that wasn't so good. And how can we, as later on in history, we as the readers or the audience, what can we learn from this small group of people, the Israelites, the Jews? What can we learn from them, right? And what can we take that was good so we can be better in front of God as Jews or non-Jews, right? Now, I'm going to read you certain quotes of what Judaism has to answer for this question. What is the purpose of life? So, for example, the book of 𝗪𝗿, which is Ecclesiastics, you know the book Ecclesiastes,
Yes, I do.
chapter 12, verse 13 says, which is the end of the book, the end of the matter, all have
Hmm.
been heard. This so Ecclesiastics, this is the answer. Number one, fear God. Two, keep his commandments, for this is the whole of man, right? So
Hmm.
clearly, King Solomon, the tradition that King Solomon wrote this, he is saying the whole purpose of humanity, you need to fear God, be aware of God, fear him, right? And keep his laws, keep what God told humanity to do, keep them, because that's the whole purpose of humanity, right? So he's basically saying the whole purpose of life is to live in awe of God and to do what he wants you to do, because you're recognizing divine kingship, God's kingship. Okay. Now another text is from the prophet Micah, Micheas, chapter 6, verse 8. He has told you, O man, what is good and what the Lord requires of you, only to act justly, love mercy, and walk humbly with your God. So here, life's purpose is all about morality, being ethical, focusing on kindness, justice, and compassion, and being humble, right? Then if we go to the Talmud, right, there's a line, an interesting line that says, the righteous sit with their crowns on their heads, enjoying the radiance of the divine presence. Now, what does that mean? So in the Talmud here, the ultimate purpose, what it's really saying is that you want to prepare yourself in this world for the spiritual joy of the world to come. Now, what does that mean? What does that mean? Spiritual radiance and your crowns, like what does that all mean, right?
Hmm.
Which is an interesting question. And I'll end with uh two very famous Jewish philosophers, Maimonides and
The
Ramban,
hospital.
like the hospital in New York. So
Hmm.
he was a rabbi and a doctor, and he said, the perfection of man lies in achieving intellectual apprehension to God. So it's all about using reason and intellect to get closer to God and his wisdom and his truth. And then the Ramban, who lived 100 years later, who is another Jewish rabbi, says man's purpose is to fulfill God's commandments and sanctify the physical world. Now, these are all
Hmm.
just different quotes. I'm not gonna go into them really. We could definitely do another episode on them. There's one quote, which is this last one I want to focus on, which is
Yeah, yeah, please.
from the book of the Ethics of the Fathers, a very old Jewish book, hundreds of years old, the 𝗪𝗪𝗁, and I've showed you this quote before, which is the world stands on three things: Torah, the service of God, and acts of kindness. Now, I'm going to apply this to I'm gonna talk about how America has done these things. Of course, America is not perfect. No country's perfect.
No
Many
country. Yeah.
many countries have done what I'm about to explain, but I just want to give examples. But I'm going to talk about this more from a non-Jewish perspective,
Yeah.
non-Jewish people, and America. Okay, okay.
Okay, no
So
problem.
basically, the world stands on three things: Torah, service of God, and acts of kindness. How's that possible, right? So Judaism, first of all, explains that the Jewish people were chosen not because they're superior, but they have a special mission. They were chosen for a specific mission, and the non-Jewish people, non-Jewish nations, have another specific mission that they have to do, and they were chosen to do that. And for the non-Jewish world, it's called the 7 laws of Noah, right? Or the Noahide
The no high
commandments.
laws, yeah.
There's different names for this, but basically, and listen, if I were to explain this, they would agree with it. Basically, there's 7 laws or 7 categories of laws where it's like don't steal, and what does that mean? No murdering, no adultery, no torturing animals, right? Uh, uh, uh Creating courts of justice, right? And
Hmm.
believe in don't no blasphemy and no idolatry, let's say, right? Like those are the 7 laws, right? And America, I would say, has done a lot of these things actually. A lot
Yeah,
of these things
implemented, yeah.
have implemented this. Now, how? Now, when I first said the world stands on 3 things, number one, Torah. Now, obviously, the word Torah just means teachings. Usually, Torah in a Jewish context is referring to the first 5 books of the Bible, Genesis to Deuteronomy, right?
Hmm.
But in the non-Jewish interpretation or way of looking at it, what I would say is that Torah can be understood as a commitment to education, intellectual growth, which is always important, and the promotion of ethical principles in that country or in the society. And America has done this 100%. Like, for example, America emphasizes, public school system, have a good education, go to college. Now, is college for everyone? Of course not. You and I agree with this, but to better yourself, to be ethical, right? And one little example is something called the GI Bill, right, which was put into place in 1944 by President Franklin D. Roosevelt, which basically the GI Bill, what it meant was that soldiers that came after World War II, there was money separated for them so they can go to college, they could have insurance, they could have a little bit of money for a down payment for a house. So clearly, America, and again, I'm not saying America's perfect, but America clearly has shown with its actions, right, by making certain political bills, certain things, hey, let's separate some money for these people, let's help them out, right? So we see ethics, and we see teachings, and we see clearly there is a commitment to education because America put money away to help these soldiers after war. Hey, let us help you because you served our country. Let us help you
Yeah.
set up your life for the future. So does that make sense? And again, I just gave one little example, right? There's so many ways of looking at this. The second thing I would say is the the avodah. That's the Hebrew word, which is service of God, the service, right? Now,
Hmm.
now for a non-Jewish country, non-Jewish person, right, we could say that the service of God can also mean living a life of purpose and dedication to a higher ideal, to good thoughts, to being ethical, as I mentioned previously, whether it's through faith, community service, being charitable, or civic engagement, right?
Hmm.
So that's the service, right? So for example, the First Amendment is what? Religious freedom. America allows all these types of philosophy and faiths to be part of America. That the First Amendment guarantees that right. Yeah, what's up? You want
Just
to
a
say something?
sec. No, not the second. Is
Is
the
is the first or second?
No, it's not the second. Second is bear to arms. First one is freedom of speech. It's in the top five, I believe. But it
Interesting.
does talk about freedom of religion, freedom of press, and
Yeah,
stuff like that.
and
Yes, yes, yes.
and
Sorry, I
so
didn't want to
forth.
correct you. I'm just from what I
No, no.
remember.
I mean, from what I remember, I thought it was the First Amendment, but we can research it later. And then you'll let me know if I'm right or wrong. Okay. I would also say
Make it.
uh, I mean, maybe as I'm talking, find out, Google it, and
Yeah,
then
okay, okay.
as I'm telling you,
Yeah, yeah.
I also want to talk about the Peace Corps, right? Where America sends this group of people, the Peace Corps, to, they send these volunteers all around the world to promote education and health and community and so forth, right? So we got the Peace Corps, we got religious freedom. So clearly, America has embodied, right, as I'm talking about service of God and teachings and so forth. What's up?
Nah, I'm just dumb.
Why? What happened? What happened?
Freedom of speech protects the freedom of press, assembly, religion, and the
Religion.
right to
Okay.
So like it is the First Amendment.
So it is the First Amendment.
I thought it was written in another amendment, but
Yeah, it's the
speech
first one.
it protects all of like the others as well. So it makes
Yeah,
sense. Yeah.
but the second one is to bear arms, correct?
Yeah, the second one is the bear arms.
Okay, good. Okay, just wanted to make sure. I mean, listen, I could be wrong too. And the last one I'll mention is the acts of kindness, which is gemilut chasadim or tzedakah, which is charity or acts of kindnesses, right? I think this is the easiest one to prove. America's a very charitable country. We
Oh,
give a lot of charity, and some of our money.
Ukraine. Yeah,
Correct, Ukraine. We send money to Israel, right? Or we help people, and we have so many nonprofits. Also, some of your money, if you make a W-2, some of your money goes to what? To Medicare, Medicaid, to these programs for people who are disabled, people who are poor, who need this money to make a living, right? So, again, I'm not saying everything's perfect, but clearly America has done these three things. Because remember, according to Judaism, right, the world stands on three things: Torah, service of God, and acts of kindness. And I do think America has done this with social safety nets, being charitable, and even like in American history with the civil rights movement, Martin Luther King, he fought for equality, right? He
Yeah.
fought for African Americans to have equality in this country. That's also another act of kindness. It's not just with money or with your time, but with being progressive and make sure that there's equality as well. So anything you want to mention about that? About judging?
Well, I didn't want to let you talk, which you did, and
Yeah.
all the points you mentioned was great. The one that was most interesting about was the first one. Was that
Torah.
no.
Which
So
one?
even before you even mentioned the Torah, we're talking about, I'm going to remind you, it's about, I wrote it here. Judaism starts and ends with God,
Mm-hmm.
meaning Judaism is focused on the now. So you
Yes.
talked about how Christianity, it talks about, heaven, hell, how to do good to, to be able to reach heaven in a sense, right? To
Correct.
be able to either, I know there's different sects of Christianity, whether you either want to live on earth, you either want to live in the skies, in the heavens. You try to reach a goal to be able to fulfill that, right? To be able to
Correct.
accomplish that, right? Which is like a long-term goal. But the interesting thing you said about Judaism is about the now.
Mm-hmm.
So what can I do now,
Yes.
in a sense, to not only improve myself, but I imagine improve the world around you, right?
Mm-hmm. Correct.
And that's what I would connect to the last 3 points that you said, which is Torah, service to God, and the acts of kindness, which is like Judaism is focused on the now, it's focused on the teachings, which is the definition of Torah, of
Yeah.
the teachings of the Bible. It's focusing on the service, how to, do stuff for God in a sense, and acts of kindness, meaning towards others, towards the world. And I feel like that way, when you focus on the now and you focus on those three things, those in a sense, the theological believings that fall under Judaism is where you could find like the meaning and fulfillment of life.
That's beautifully said. 100%. I would agree with you. Yeah.
It was very interesting though, because you also brought up Ecclesiastes and the little bit that I was able to research about theology. Um, it was also mentioned in the Christianity Ecclesiastes. So that's why I
Oh,
laughed when you mentioned it.
well, a lot of people, and again, this is just a little point. A lot of people believe that Christianity is vastly different. I mean, there are a lot of differences, don't get me wrong, but Christianity came out of Judaism. Christianity first started as a sect of Judaism, and then it became its own thing eventually, but it comes out of Judaism. So there's definitely has to be shared
Doesn't
things. Yeah.
doesn't the majority of religions come out of Judaism?
Um, Christianity definitely did, and then Islam takes some from Judaism and Christianity as well. Do other religions? Uh, maybe,
Well,
maybe not.
that's why I didn't say
Yeah,
everything. I said majority.
or a lot. I
Or
mean,
like the
mm,
ones that base themselves off Judaistic values, I
so
guess.
that would be the Abrahamic faith, probably.
Yeah, yeah.
Now the polytheism, depending which scholar or historian, maybe I think the majority would say no, or maybe yes. I'm not sure, But I would say the main three ones they're definitely taking from the father, which is Judaism, because it is the oldest out of all three, right? So yeah,
Interesting, interesting.
yes.
I like that. But yeah, I think we've been able to talk about the philosophical and the theological ways of viewing life.
Hmm.
I believe I'm not going to expand too much into Christianity because I believe you did mention a little bit about it, and
Yeah.
it also falls a little bit into what Judaism believes as well, not to its totality, but part.
Correct.
But one thing I found very interesting when I was able to compare the philosophical and the theological way of viewing
Mm.
life is that
Philosophical.
philosophically, it focuses on rationality, it
Hmm.
focuses on the autonomy, which is self-government,
Hmm.
and the subjective interpretation of
Correct.
life,
Hmm.
right? The strength that the philosophical uh, way of life views, the strength of it is its adaptability,
Mm. Hmm.
but it lacks in answers,
Hmm.
especially like the ultimate answers.
Okay.
Wow. And you can tell me what you believe on this after
Yeah,
I
of course.
mentioned the theological. And the
Yes.
theological way of viewing life, of its meaning, of its purpose, is anchored in faith, is anchored in divine authority. It it offers divine purposes, um, but it requires belief in the supernatural.
Hmm. Interesting. Okay. So that's the differences that you see, right? Correct?
Yes.
Or that you
While
researched. Yeah.
that I researched and that I guess it was an interpretation that I was able to come down to when it
Hmm.
comes to the philosophical and the theological ways of viewing it.
Hmm.
One, it focuses on like self-government, on subjective interpretation, and it's very adaptable,
Hmm.
but it lacks answers.
Hmm.
While the other one is obviously based on faith, on divine authority, on it offers like definitive purposes on like
Hmm.
what the Bible says,
Hmm.
but it requires for you to believe in the supernatural
Or a higher being. Okay.
or a
All
higher
right.
being. Yeah.
So what I would say, so wow, man,
Hmm.
when you said all this, a whole array of different ideas and thoughts came to my head, like a whole thing. It actually reminded me, and I'm going to connect this,
Hmm.
of a holiday that's coming up, Hanukkah. It's coming up in about 2 weeks, right? Um, and
Hanukkah? Oh yeah, Hanukkah is
Hanukkah
coming.
is it coming up in 2 weeks?
Hanukkah, sorry. Yeah,
Yes.
I remember I was in Israel when Hanukkah was
Oh
2 years
yes,
ago.
yes, and you got to do some cool stuff there. Yeah.
Yeah, 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 yeah.
Um, so now why did that come to my head? Now, a lot of the times people think that Hanukkah is just a Jewish Christmas and that's it. And like it's at the same time as Christmas, so the Jewish kids don't feel bad, right? Now, that is super false, right? That
Yeah,
is
I was
is
like,
I've
it's not
I've
even close.
heard that a lot of times. But Hanukkah is actually all about religious freedom. Now, why am I saying this? Because what happened, again, I'm not going to go into all the details, just I'm going to go into a very brief summary, but the bigger idea, what was happening, there was a clash between
There.
Greek philosophy, the Greeks, and
Hmm.
the Greek way of thinking and Greek universal ideas, and Judaism was clashing because they actually disagree in a lot of things, right?
Hmm.
Like these philosophies, these ways of thinking that the Greeks would think goes against a Judaism a lot.
Hmm.
From my research, a lot of the Greek philosophy, they didn't believe that the universe was created. It was always there. It was always there. So in reality, it wasn't created by a deity, right? Greeks believed in polytheism and more than one god, right? They weren't monotheistic. They
Yeah.
didn't, right? The Greeks thought that they were the pinnacle of life. The Greeks thought that, hey, we are the best in art, philosophy, logic, reason, mathematics, everything. The world should want to be like us. But then they see Jews here, like, you Jews don't want to be like us. You guys want to stay Jewish and follow your Torah and your Shabbats and your mitzvahs. Like, what's this about, right? Or like the Greeks didn't really believe that God could pick a certain people to do a certain mission, because it goes against the Greek idea, like we're the best, like that. Hey, that's impossible. Or that the Greeks also believe that ethics and morality comes from reasoning and logic, not from God or the divine. So the Greeks were trying, they weren't trying to kill, like physically kill the Jews, but what they were trying to do, they were trying to get rid of Judaism, completely get rid of Judaism. Like, let's get rid of this religion. This is so weird. Like we don't want this. So they banned circumcisions for babies. They said no more Torah, no more kosher food, no more Shabbat. And the Jews were like, hey, this is unfair. So of course, a war happened, and eventually the Maccabeans, which was a family, right? Judah the Maccabean and his brothers and his family, they get some Jews, and they're able to defeat the Greeks, and they actually got the temple back, right? And they actually got the temple back on the 25th day of Kislev, which is the Hebrew month that usually falls in December, the 25th day, right? And then it goes on for 8 days. So now, when you mentioned that this philosophy is very adaptable, it has to be adaptable because life changes a lot of the times, and new things are discovered, right? And because we usually don't have access to God usually, or the metaphysical or the spiritual realms, we don't really have access to that so much or at all, right? So it's kind of hard to believe in that, especially if you weren't raised to believe in that. So it's like we have to use our logic and our reason. But as you mentioned previously earlier, but many people's logic and reason can be flawed. That's why there's logical fallacies and so forth, right? We can't always trust our reason and our logic, because we as humans, we're imperfect. We could fail. So that's why when you have theology or religion, whatever, whichever one we're talking about, there's a higher being, and he knows what's best because he's the creator, and God sees the past, present, and future all in once. So he knows what's best for everything, even though right now we might not, it might not look like the best thing right now, but I'm gonna believe that God knows what's best for me in this country and whatever, right? Now, of course, you could take that to an extreme, and you could take that thought, and it could become toxic and anti-Semitic and anti-whatever. So it could become dangerous. So there has to be a balance, right? There has to be a balance. I say the best balance is to have both, right? Someone who's very known for this, and then I want to hear your thoughts on this, and tell me if I answer your question. Maimonides, like Maimonides Hospital, right? The Rambam, he was really into this. Like, hey, I believe in God, and I believe in spirituality, but I also need to investigate as much as I can using my reason and my logic and the text and the evidence. Let me get as much evidence as I can to find out what is the closest thing to the truth that I can wrap my head around it. Of course, I'm not going to wrap my head around I'm not going to be able to wrap my head around everything, but if I use the reason and logic that God gave me to use, and I'm not just doing everything by blind faith, right? Because obviously you need faith,
I was gonna mention that. Yeah. Uh-huh.
but a lot of times in Judaism, it's not really all about blind faith. It's about mixing the reason, logic, and investigating and debating to find the answer. I'm not saying blind faith is always bad, but it's not always good as well. So did I answer your question? I know I said a lot of stuff.
No, you did. You did. I find it very interesting how a lot of known philosophers or scholars come from Greece or Judaism, which is very funny.
That's true. Yeah, that's true. That's true. Yes, yes.
They come from those two ethnicities, but yeah, they were both fighting because one was very secular, logical, while the other one was viewing it from the theological way.
Mhm.
But I found your answers very, very profound, very interesting. Um, I'm trying to remember a point you said. Can you remind me the last point you said?
Mhm.
What was the
About
last point you?
that I think that maybe the best approach is to mix both, have that theological, but
Right.
also use reason and logic.
Okay, so now I
Yeah.
remember. So what that I think I also agree with that. Like that is the best way, right? You can't base everything off blind faith. Either way, if you're going to base your views or your purpose in life, the meaning of it off the theological way, you can't just do everything blindly, which
Mhm.
is one thing I would say I agree with what Maimonides did, which is where, yeah, you could do it theologically, but at the same time, you have to find, if you seek for it, you have to find the balance with the science part of it, with the logical part of it, with the philosophical part of it, because
Right.
I feel like that way you don't only find the insights, I guess, the theological insights. You
Mhm.
also find the philosophical insights, and in that way you could find the meaning of life.